So I have a number of location recordings coming up, and I thought I'd share some of the equipment I use with you all. Some of you have expressed interest in this. So I put on this table a few stereo mics that I use. I love stereo mics. They're kind of one point setup. You get two capsules. You can change the patterns, as you see here, to Blumline or XY or really anything. So this is a Neumann SM69 FET, and this is a Neumann SM69 tube, very old mic here from the 50s and 60s, I believe. And the way these work is you have two capsules. So wherever the logo is, that's forward. And then basically that's the front capsule. So that's facing forward. And this capsule is adjustable. So you can do an XY. So this is both capsules facing forward. You see the dot there. And you know on a Neumann mic, the capsule is forward when you see the logo there. And then you can move it like this and get a true XY. And then you would position the mic front. It would be front facing like that, but this would be right or left depending on where you're looking at it from, and that's the other direction. So you see how that works. So very, very convenient, and you won't get any phase cancellation because they're coincident. They're on top of each other. So this uses a tube, an AC701, I believe. Very expensive tube if you can find them anymore. I have several of them. I've never had one go bad though. They're kind of amazing little tubes. They're tiny. There's also a sub tube that you can use. I have a few of those, but I haven't tried them yet. And the FET version is solid state. Does not use a tube. It uses this control box, and it uses 48-volt phantom power. This is the box for the tube. So it's a power supply basically. And these things, the caps go bad. I can replace them. The capacitors, transformers, things go bad. But I have all the parts, and you see the caps in there. They'll leak over time, but I've learned how to fix all this stuff. So I have supplies of all this. So I've had these mics for about 30 years. I have lots of tube mics, AKG tube mics, Neumann tube mics. I don't think the tube makes that much of a difference in the sound. It's more the transformer, but the mics sound great. The older Neumanns. I don't care for the new ones at all. They're sterile sounding to me, so that's just my opinion. All right. The purple is the FET, and the black will always be the tube mics, just so you know that. Now, these are expensive mics, and obviously everybody's not going to own them, but lots of studios have them. You see them for sale. They make great piano mics or drum overhead mics at a distance. They're incredible. Usually I'll put one in a room and compress the living hell out of it for like a rock session. And I really like that sound. And again, it's coincidence, so you're not going to get any phase cancellation from the mic itself, maybe from other mics, but not this one. So this is a Sound Devices 788T. Sometimes I'll use this live. It's an 8-channel recorder, and it's got 8 really quiet, nice preamps in there. It's a great sounding little unit. But basically, before I do a session, what I do is I break out everything I'm going to use. And by session, I mean now a live session. I'm going to record a few orchestras this weekend. And when I do that, I use lots of mics, maybe 8 to 12 mics, depending on if there's soloist or what they want spotted. And definitely at least 4 in the actual hall or the room to get that sound. So I go through everything and I test it before I leave for the gig. So when I get to the gig, it's just me by myself. So I don't run into trouble like a bad mic, a bad cable. So that takes time, but it's very, very important. So that's what I'm doing today. And I thought while I had all this set up, I would show you the equipment I use. So right now I'm testing this mic, testing, both capsules. You can do that very, very lightly or snap in front. Now you see how they both activate at the same time. So this will be my main stereo mic. Also, you must shock mount things when you do live recordings, especially if the stands are on the floor. Make sure this is secure here. So this is an old Neumann, very old Neumann shock mount, probably 75 years old. And I've replaced all the parts at least once, except the basket. I've restrung it with new elastic. The elastics go bad after about 10, 15 years. So, I'm always replacing these. And the mic just basically fits. See if I can do this without it being on the stand. Just like that. These parts over time get very brittle. The plastic parts, they will break, so you got to be really gentle. But that's how that works. And then it's in that shock mount, so when there's footfalls or sounds on the floor, it's not transferring directly to the mic. Now usually I'll roll off, unless there's an organ in the concert, pretty much most everything below 40 hertz. That's variable, but that's where you get a lot of HVAC noise or road noise if it's near the road or stuff like that. So I will do that. Now these mics have no kind of roll off. This is old school stuff, like all the new mics have, high pass filters, which means that it rolls off the low end and all kinds of things, or pads. These mics don't have anything like that, which I like because it doesn't interfere with the circuitry. So it's important that you can pad the recorder. This has a limiter on it and stuff like that. But the power supplies or the mics don't have anything. It's very pure as far as that goes. Great for classical and jazz recording. For rock and roll recording, I don't use anything this elaborate. I have good mics I use for that, but this is for a classical recording. So we'll be back in a second, and I'll show you some other mics that I use for this. But once again, these are the Neumann SM69 FET, so solid state, and tube mic here. So the other mics that I use for recording consist of these Sennheiser MKH series. So this is a old MKH 80. They have an 800 now. They also have a great stereo mic, but I love these mics. They're like Swiss Army knives. So you see it has all the different patterns, 5 different patterns. You have an omnidirectional pattern. You have a wide cardioid, a regular cardioid, hypercardioid, and figure 8. So if you want to get rid of instruments that are in proximity to another instrument, you could use hypercardioid. If you want to use them out in the hall, you can use omni. If you want to capture more instruments in a section, you could use wide cardioid. It also has a pad, so a -6 or -12 dBs. It also has a boost, which is extremely rare. I've never seen this on another mic. 10 kilohertz, which is way up there. You can add some shine to instruments. Works great on percussion, and even sometimes if you want a brighter piano. If I run into an old Steinway that's pretty dark and I want to brighten it up for a jazz gig or something, I may add about 3 dBs up there. But normally I'll do that in the mixing. And then it's got the roll-off 50 kilohertz. You can do 3 dBs or 6 dBs. So very, very useful. And these mics are pretty much bulletproof. They're extremely tough. I own lots and lots of these. Again, they don't make this version anymore, but they make an 800, which is just as good. I don't hear a difference in the sound of those. I own some of those as well. And this uses phantom power, just regular XLR. So I always test these mics, even though I've never had one go wrong. But I'll test them in pairs for volume, and you see there. So just to make sure they're the same output or input. Now this particular version, this is MKH 40. So this is the standalone cardioid version of the same mic. Sounds exactly the same. It has also the roll-off, which is about, I think, 40 or 50 hertz, so high-pass filter. And it's got a 10 dB pad on there, which I use sometimes. This is a great all-round drum mic for overheads, anything. And you can find these the MK80s are pretty expensive, or the 800s, but you can find these cheap. Now, when I say cheap, they're under $1,000. These are expensive microphones. But if you have a recording business, you have to use really good microphones, okay? Of course, you can get less expensive Shure mics and all that. The difference in those, they're going to have a higher self-noise ratio. So in other words, if you're doing classical recording, those mics are going to be noisier. And that's not acceptable for some of the recordings that I do, to have all that noise. One mic's not too bad. When you have 8, 10 mics set up and they all have, a high self-noise, you start getting into some hiss issues. So these mics are really, really great. They're very low noise. The patterns are very accurate, tight cardioid patterns. So they're great. And again, a handful of these and maybe 5 or 6 of these and you're all set. And then a couple of those Neumann large diaphragm mics for the hall, captures pretty much the whole orchestra or band or whatever. You're good to go. So that's what I use. I do have some hypercardioid Neumann 185s, older mics, that I use sometimes for spotting a cello or something like that. But normally this is what I use, and I've been using it for the last 30 years or so for my recording business. So that's what I recommend. Of course, there's cheaper options always, but with microphones, you pretty much get what you pay for. Now, once again, if you're doing critical recordings like classical, acoustic music, bluegrass, stuff like that, you want a really low noise floor. If you're doing a lot of rock and roll and stuff like that, or louder music, don't worry about it, because the noise floor is not going to be that important. A lot of times for those sessions, you want mics with a little more character too. These mics, they're not sterile, but they're very pure to the sound source. So they don't have big bumps anywhere in the frequency spectrum. So a lot of the other mics, the cheaper mics, will have bumps lower or higher, so they're not accurate, but they may flatter the source. So that's something you always want to think about. So I'll do some other videos on this subject as our gigs come up and I have the stuff out. It's more convenient for me to do them then, but from time to time. I also have a playlist with some recording things that I did way back in the COVID days, and that's when I took a bunch of mics out. You might want to look at those. This will be on that playlist as well. Thanks.